welcome to another video, and this one, as you can probably see, is a little bit about contracts. And now, obvious why I'm going to be talking about this, especially if you're a European fan and kind of watching what's been happening. So I'm not going to name any names, but there's been a few bits of the contract talk going about. So, contracts. And this is interesting for me for several reasons. I've been involved with contracts for a little while. Some people actually get me to look over their contracts. Now, I'm no lawyer, right? I put this straight out there. Anything I say legal-wise cannot be taken as from a lawyer or whatever, anything like that. However, I do understand stupid language, and I do understand, you know, when people try to take people for a ride. Case in point, there was a contract someone showed me, not from an organisation, but from a company. And they were talking about what they expected to get from it. And then I had to kind of point out to them as I was reading over this contract that had been sent that all the stuff they had talked about was not in this contract. I was like, where is this stuff they said you were going to give you and all this, you know, what would happen in a year? And he went, oh, well, that's what he said to me. I went, yeah, but none of that in a year's time is in this contract. And I think that's a kind of a fault. And the first thing we're going to come to is it's a fault of a lot of people who've done this. Now, and I'm going to use some examples here, but they're not actually directed at any teams. You should point out these are just hypotheticals. If something's not in your contract, then it's really kind of not real. There's been a lot of verbal agreements over the years of, oh, you know, he said we'll get a bigger salary if we win a few tournaments. Well, he said that, but once they've got you under that contract, it's kind of not going to happen. Why pay someone more if you don't have to? Especially if you've got them for another 8 months and you think they might leave anyway. And this has been happening more and more. I think as time goes on, contracts are going to get more and more complicated, and you can bet that that's going to happen, and that's okay. But it's going to get more and more complicated from both sides. Orgs are going to have to step their game up because some of the contracts I've seen from orgs, not all of them, don't get me wrong, there are some very good orgs out there with good contracts, are really, really bad. And they're not bad because of the legalese, and they're not bad because they're trying to screw someone over. They don't take into account a lot of things. Now, one of the main things that bothers me about players when they sign a contract is, don't get me wrong, funding isn't always there and salaries and so on and so forth, but they just go, oh yeah, I signed it, but now I don't want to do that. I was like, but you must have known that this might happen. Like, I don't sign a phone contract and then go after 3 rounds and go, kind of want to switch to a new one now. How do I get my contract? Do I just ignore it? No. Don't get me wrong. There's been in the past where contracts are not worth the paper they're written on. But now it's getting to a point where you will be locked down, especially if you're paid a salary and that organisation can afford to lock you in. They're going to do it. I've already said to people I would do it if I had the money to lock someone in, especially if it's a good player and you don't want them to go anywhere else. So for me, like I said, a lot of players don't kind of negotiate, and what I mean by negotiation is not just your basic. They say, oh, salary, funding in, sign on the dotted line, I'm here for 17 years, a buyout clause of $500,000. Well, that's kind of stupid, and yes, you signed it, and yes, you're going to have to be expected to honour that contract. The parts I take issue with is stuff like, let's take the CWL as an example. This is just an example. Say you've signed into a team and the CWL's coming up or whatever, you expect to qualify. You're fairly certain you can qualify the CWL. Now, to get a salary from a team, a lot of teams in CWL are expecting one, and I have no issue with that. You know, the CWL spots are worth a fair amount of money. But obviously an org is going to say, but what if you don't get in? And the more of a risk you are, the less an org is going to want to pay you. So you maybe sign up for an org and go, well, we'll figure it out afterwards because we need to attend this LAN or that LAN. What they don't do is go, right, well, let's talk about, you know, negotiating the contract. In the contract, something like, if we qualify for X, we get X. You know, actual variable terms. And the reason for that is very important. It's like, what you want out of your contract is what you want out of your contract, right? I mean, if you think a buyout clause of 40 grand a player is acceptable, then that's fine. But when you want to get out of your contract in 3 months' time, and they're such saying you can't go anywhere, and you go, oh, this is unfair. No, it's not. You sign that contract. And this has been coming up more and more. And it's something that I think both sides of the argument. Yes, there are some orgs that will lock people down, but there are also a lot of untold stories where I've heard orgs of just letting these players go without too much of a fuss, or just, you know, kind of forfeiting their last month's salary. Now, this is interesting. A lot of this goes on behind closed doors. We only hear about the very few that actually kind of come out or kind of explode places. And for me, I really wish the players would take this a little bit more serious, because they're going to have to really adjust as well. No more just jumping in. When you sign something, you have to be really certain you want to sign it. Yes, it's great getting that funding. Yes, it's great kind of getting that salary. But for one event, is it worth pushing it like that? I mean, if you think you can get a bigger deal off the back of it, do you sign a deal with that org for that event to have kind of, the presence? I think players need to be a little bit more clever with maybe what they're doing, and I think in time we'll be seeing more and more outside agencies taking care of that, if I'm honest. The other one we should probably talk about is these grey areas we've been seeing with conduct and publicity and image rights. These are grey areas. Like I said, I've had a few contract lawyers contact me pro bono, talk about a few things, but I've not taken any of them up yet because my contracts are fine. But it's players' contracts they really need looking after, and I'm hoping a few of these guys come through and actually look over some of these contracts. Contracts where I've heard players been fined for not representing the brand properly, but it's very generic in what they've actually done. Players been fined, or at least forfeiting salaries for very, very kind of grey area things. And like I said, I think that's where we start to find more and more longer contracts, because there's more and more put into them. And like I said, I think both sides will have to get it. I think players are going to have to be a little bit more savvy with what they're actually signing, asking, what does this mean? If you've got in there, we reserve the right to withhold your salary for X, Y, Z, or fine you X, Y, Z. That needs a little more clarity in my mind. I would not be happy signing a contract that said it was going to fine me or deduct my money or whatever reason without some hard and fast rules, or at least a recourse. Because that's your money, and in my opinion, you don't mess with people's money if you can help it. That's the last thing you mess with, people's livings. And that's what a lot of these players are. You got to remember, for anyone out there who's not a pro player, these players are doing this as a job. And don't get me wrong, there are easier ways to earn money out there than a pro player, but this is what they want to do. And if they want to be taken professionally and they're taking it as a professional, then we deserve to see their stuff as any other job would be. Same if they were an accountant and someone wasn't paying them, or working as a nurse or a doctor. Don't get me wrong, I'm not calling these players nurse, doctors, or accountants. Trust me on that, I'm not doing that. But in the same way, this is a living for them, and it's a job, and that has to be taken very, very seriously in my book, at the very least. It has to be taken with that rock on, well, this is someone's living, this is someone's life. And I know some of these players are very immature, and I know some of these org scumbag people. But this is where we have to go from now. With the CWL, well, I've heard terms like 50,000 being bandied around for slots, for these team slots and teams. That's serious money. So I expect it, at least this season, I think most of the contracts are done or whatever. But I think next season is where we're going to see a lot of these issues. When players become free and they're like, right, well, the qualification process and how this all goes on for the next time, that's going to really come down to it. And I'm hoping that both sides of the orgs and the players kind of get through this teething period of in my opinion, stepping up these contracts, because I think it's going to have to happen, and I'm hoping that it doesn't get too. I don't hope anyone doesn't get screwed anymore, because I've seen some people and you can never really tell the truth because of the lack of evidence. But if someone says something to you and you don't have it in writing, or you don't have any proof of it, it's probably not real. We've seen it with people who've been screwed out of shares. We've seen it with people who've been screwed out of teams, or they've been promised to be let go. That needs to stop happening. It doesn't happen as often as it happens more often than it should do. But all right, that's just me. That's kind of something. This is an issue that I've been talking around a lot with players, a lot with orgs, both sides of the argument. Like I said, there is no good side and bad side of this argument. Players are kind of stupid at times, and very immature, and they maybe take the wrong way of doing things, and maybe a little bit naive with some of these contracts they're signing. But orgs at the same time, I think a few of them, especially the lower level ones, kind of have to step their game up and kind of think about what they're actually doing and putting to paper. Don't get me wrong, some people have inflated expectations of themselves, and some orgs are trying to get their money's worth, and it's not easy. It's really hard for an org to earn money, and it's really hard for a player to kind of try and earn a living from this. I think that's where it stems from. If there was more money, it wouldn't be so bad. If there was a lot more money, it would be even worse. But yeah, this is kind of me talking about contracts. I kind of want to see what people think about this. Like I said, I'm trying to talk more with the guys in the YouTube comments. Hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on YouTube, give this a like, watch my video, subscribe. Let me know what you actually think, and I'm sure you've all got horror stories. But thank you all for watching. Until then, See you next time. Alright, welcome. Fuck.